Morning all. Let's have a look at the encounter between Vladimir Kramnik playing white and Magnus Carlsen in round 3 of the London Chess Classic. This started off with knight f3 and we saw an English opening emerge here, symmetrical for the moment. Now e5, so Magnus is not minding weakening a bit d5. It is a standard system which he is adopting here. It's kind of a reverse Botvinnik system, a bind on d4 against white playing for d4, but the concession is the d5 square. Often white's plan is something like this to try and get pressure on the b file, maybe encourage light square weaknesses, and often this knight maneuver later comes in as useful on c2 for either helping b4 or going to d5. So that's the basic plan for white, and we see that played out a little bit in this game. Now we see a3. It doesn't look on the surface too ambitious, but if it can get a small positional advantage, that's what a player with the English opening just enjoys, avoiding a lot of opening theory. So knight e1, the knight is heading for c2, d6, okay, and after knight c2, in this position, black castled, okay. And you might think, well, bishop e6 is also interesting to protect c4, and we'll get to that in a moment. For the moment, black castled, and in any case, white plays d3 here. So bishop e6 is not a direct threat. But Magnus's next move was questioned by himself in post-mortem. Rook b8, as though it was a bit of a slip up for move order for bishop e6. Now the exact reasons for this slippage in move order we'll try and investigate in the second pass of the game. If we did a reference on this particular position, a reference check, so I'm just going into my Chessbase Lite reference tab, I find 13 games with bishop e6 as Magnus indicated, now 37, pardon me, 37 with bishop e6 and only 11 with rook ab8. Does it really matter? We'll try and check this out, this nuance. It may be just a tiny nuance without too much significance, because white's basic plan is going to happen anyway, one would expect. Okay, I mean the score percentage on bishop e6 is 66.7 for white, and on rook ab8 it's slightly higher with 70.8. And if we go into this, the top moves here, you know, white is still playing rook ab1 with 7 games, and there's bishop g5 with 5 games. Okay, so rook ab1 in any case. But I think Vladimir was thinking, was this move order preparation now? It was really just a slip up, I think, from Magnus for his move orders. But I'll give you a video link in the description if you want to see the post-mortem that was carried out between both players after the game about this. So bishop e6, we see b4, which seems the entirely logical plan. There's no tactic on c3 here. E4 will just take with the knight, but e4 breaks need to be factored in. There is points in this game. ab. Now Magnus takes on b4. What he's preparing for is to play the move d5 to try and break the bind. So he takes on b4 here, and now plays d5. Now with d5 there's a slight issue potentially on this diagonal, and that was highlighted, I think, in their post-mortems, either in this position or a little bit later. It looks as though it might have been actually this position. So in this position c takes d5 was played. You might think, are we totally out of theory here? Actually, there is a game even in my light database. There is a few games here even from this position with c4 takes d5, 6 games. Bishop a3, 1 game. Knight takes 1 game. Queen b3, 1 game. So this is still a kind of virtual starting position for many games. The most popular being just taking the pawn on d5 here. Bishop a3 was played in 1957 in this position between Taimanov and Suetin. Taimanov won that game. So okay, but let's not venture too far from our main game. So c takes d5 is the most common move, I believe. Knight takes, and a few exchanges, and you think, well, this is a bit dull. All these exchanges, what has white actually achieved from all this? As mentioned, white really just wants a small advantage, and a very accurate move, it seems, here was played by Vladimir, which maybe causes the first minor inaccuracy. White really wants to put some pressure on this b pawn. It is the backward pawn on that file. Queen b3 is obviously ruled out by the bishop. So the bishop's the problem piece, actually, to get access to b3. There's some other interesting moves, though, of course, like queen a4 might be useful, bishop a3 might be useful here. We need to check those out in the second pass, but this next move was a forcing move, rook b5. Just asking the bishop, what is it doing there? I think Magnus regretted now bishop takes g2, which he basically indicated it's like losing a pawn. He'd rather have a weak pawn, which is not definitely lost, with bishop c6, even if that's a weak pawn. I don't think he liked his next move much. Bishop takes g2. Basically, this b pawn is quite awkward, and e5 is also a potential target as well coming up. So we see after queen d7 the ideal square for that queen b3, and it's also pinning, of course, f7. Okay, so if bishop b2, that becomes very, very awkward. We see rook fc8, and an invisible tactical threat, as mentioned by both players. If white plays a bit too casually, then rook c3 is a decoy resource away from the rook here. So something like bishop e3, there might be rook c3 that was mentioned, sawn by both players. They were saying all what they call the tricks, and that's what I found the most interesting thing, actually, about the commentary, that both players were happy to use the word tricks quite a lot. I guess I consider in my own games resources, but tricks may be a more interesting type of resource, like a kind of magic trick. So the magic trick here is rook c3. That's ruled out by Vladimir's next move, because it's almost as if there's an implication of some sort of, you know, a trick is something naughty, a concession. Not really. Tricks are just very interesting resources, I think. So rook c3, an interesting resource, ruled out. And Vladimir talks about it as though that's part of counterplay reduction, just to secure c3 here. He's putting pressure on e5. It looks like the logical move. So he's got both targets set in his sights without the tricks like rook c3. So queen d6. Magnus is setting up, obviously, some more tricks here. It can't really be taken surely, that pawn here, because of rook b8. We'll check that out. That seems to rebound. It might rebound anyway, but in the game it was rook b1. Okay, starting to consider more pressure now on b7 as soon as this bishop moves safely, because the queen's no longer hitting that rook, so there's no rook c3 resource at the moment. We see rook c5, and now, okay, this is interesting, because potentially I think that there is a bishop a3 resource maybe here, but we'll check that out in the second pass. White played in this position rook b6, and now after rook c6 he does actually win the b7 pawn, which you might think is a great success for the whole opening, because that was one of the major points of the whole b4 plan, was to get some queenside pressure, and in particular to target b7. So he wins b7 here, finally a pawn up. So rook takes, queen takes, but there's a small concession, rook b6, and black has got a seemingly nasty pin. Check. we see queen f8 offering exchange of queens to leave a very, very nasty pin. Queen d7 though, and I think Vladimir was very happy with this concept. It basically, with queen d7, he's still supporting the c8 square, so he can move rook c1, threatening rook c8. So this pin is not as important as it seems because of that tactical idea. And this next move by Magnus caught him by surprise, as though it was like giving him an extra tempo. The move Magnus played, in light of his back row, I mean, other moves are also, of course, answerable with rook c1 for rook c8. So the king on the back row might not be too ideal. Magnus plays h5, giving the king potentially king h7 to get out of this tactical issue. And here it gets very interesting. You might think, well, what on earth was this next move about? Vladimir plays in this position the move e4, and on the surface, from one perspective of playing e4, okay, white's a pawn up, and at some point wants to play f4 at some point in the game. He's leaving himself with this backward pawn, and it's because of the backward pawn that Magnus is not afraid to want an exchange of queens with queen d6. But just returning back for a moment here, if e4 wasn't played, I think basically there were some tactical ideas in this position involving e2, which we need to really check out in the second pass, involving the queen coming like this into these squares for e2. So by some process of elimination, Vladimir worked out that he felt e4 was the best. But yeah, we'll check out the possibilities here. There were a lot of tricks, as both players were alluding to, during the course of this game. So e4, queen d6, not minding the exchange of queens here. But queen e8 check was played, queen f8, queen d7, and again, and now it was taken. And you might think, okay, a pawn up, but how does white actually exploit this extra pawn up? I think during the streaming I thought a plan just slowly get the king here and play for f4. It's very difficult always because that'll be check, winning the bishop. So even that kind of idealistic plan to try and play f4 doesn't seem to do much. But let's see, so rook d1. Now f4 in this position with the king here is not check, and that could be useful to try and get some centre pawns going. But it's one move away. Magnus plays f5, so he's immediately threatening fe because of this pin on d3. It's just one move away. And I think Vladimir was mentioning that a lot of his operations were just one move too far away. So he's having to play the more passive f3 here. And now f takes, we see rook b6, bishop c3, rook b3, and it's a difficult position now for the bishop here. It is locked out of the game. Potentially if this rook ventures, rook b1 is going to be very painful for winning the bishop, basically, almost. Has to be protected all the time. So there's an issue with this bishop being locked out and this backward pawn. So even though white's a pawn up, how to exploit the extra pawn? King f7, king f3, the kings are brought to the centre. h3 as though g4 is on the cards, bishop h6, king e2, bishop g5, rook g1 as though g4 is really on the cards, bishop h6. Okay, and in this position g4 might be answerable by h4, and it seems Vladimir wanted to play g4 but as effectively as possible, so he plays h4, and the plan seems to be g4. And after king d6 here, I think he put himself off g4 playing it. Thought there might be some potential advantageous possibilities by playing g4, but he put himself off doing that. Nothing that clear was reached in post-mortem though there. So rook d1 was instead played. Yes, seemingly passive, but no, d4 here, offering g3 is another possibility to take here and maybe bring the rook off of g3, so bring the rook like this, and that would be dangerous. That's the plan. King e6 though was played. Now going back here, changing white obviously without the king as a target, rook f1. Obviously g4 is now ruled out, he's lost that possibility. So rook d1, rook b3, rook g1, so g4 again is on the cards. But now king f6 doesn't make it that appealing. Rook h1, king e6. Okay, so both players are kind of wondering about exactly what to do, and now another committal move, d4, offering g3 for e5, but Magnus is playing actually check and taking the e4 pawn, not the g3 pawn, so takes king f5, and the king's getting kind of a little bit aggressive here, coming to g4, and then we see check, 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 and then bishop takes e5, check, exchange here, and it looks as though the position is very calm now, getting very calm, check, and now rook g4, it looks very drawish indeed, and here the players finally agree a draw. Okay, so a peaceful conclusion. Let's look at this. There were lots of tricks, as they say, in the course of this game, and we've really just looked at the game very casually here. So let's check again in this second pass to see what we can pick out technically from the game. Let's actually take Black's perspective to offer a different perspective now on the game from Magnus's point of view. So we'll turn on our engine. So knight f3. Okay, we see an English opening, e5, with a standard plan of fianchettoing here, and it's one that I've been using usually with limited success against White's plan. So it's very interesting to see this plan adopted by Magnus. White's plan is usually very effective, even on blitz chess. It's very easy to play for White, this position, with this b4 break in mind. So d3, we see rook b8. Is that really an inaccuracy, and why on earth would it be an inaccuracy? It's probably very difficult to judge. Actually, and the engine's not a good judge of opening book here. I'm not really entirely sure why bishop e6 would be a better move order, unless potentially it's to do with offering a d5 break possibility a bit quicker in this position. Also, okay, hang on a sec. The rook on a8 is helping to stop b4 here. So maybe this is why bishop e6 is more accurate. That b4 is kind of more potentially ruled out than rook b8, but here, I mean, b4 is also ruled out in any case. So I'm not really sure. So answers in the comments, questions in the comments of YouTube, if you really think there's a big difference between rook b8 and bishop e6. Okay, so rook b8 was played by Magnus, and now bishop e6. I think in both cases White's going to play for b4 like this with rook b1 in any case. Black playing for d5 is a bit committal really, and maybe Black shouldn't actually be playing for d5 at all, because there's always knight e3 after, and maybe even knight c4. So it's dangerous on, and it's, as far as black's light squares, it's dangerous, I think, to play d5, and that's maybe one of the key nuances of this system, that as black you need to time d5 perfectly. You need to wait for white to commit to b4, so to get some exchanges there, but it is voluntarily leaving a weak b7 pawn. But d5 here is the key move. From an engine point of view, bishop a3 is liked, and we did see at least one stem game with bishop e3, but cd is the main move, which is now preferred in any case by the engine. So c takes d5. Okay, and white's advantage is less than half a pawn. You might think, well, why would black want to play this? Well, he is exchanging off a lot of pieces and neutralizing the pressure basically, but there is a concession which is emphasized now by Vladimir's next very precise move, namely rook b5, which the engine really likes here. A lot of pressure on that b7 pawn. Magnus did feel bishop c6 was an improvement over bishop takes g2, and that's actually exactly what the engine thinks. Bishop c6 is slightly stronger. Just having a weakened pawn may be better than one which is definitely lost. So in the game after bishop g2, I think the b pawn's fate is kind of being sealed here. But rook fc8 does offer, if we look at tactical threat analysis, rook c3 is the threat here, or trick as they would say. So bishop b2 is a good move in light of that, put pressure logically on e5 and cover that c3 square. Okay, so what does black do now about e5 and b7? Well, Magnus chose in this position queen d6, which isn't particularly liked on this very brief analysis. If we go into check here as an alternative, so e4, queen c2, is this better? It's certainly interesting, but e5 is vulnerable. It's interesting, but it's still an advantage for white, basically. So white does have a pleasant position here. Maybe he's achieved what he wanted to mostly achieve from this opening. So queen d6 is offering b7. It can't be taken here. I think this just backfires. In fact, forget rook takes b7. Even stronger, that actually doesn't work anyway here because of bishop a3. And that's good for white, but actually the more key problem is, as mentioned by the engine, just queen c6, check, ouch. So that's an important trick for sure. So for the moment, just build up on that b7 pawn safely. Does it? Rook c5 was played down. Let's just quickly check out, is bishop a3 at all playable or not? Might offer a small advantage. If it takes here, this is good for white, I think, winning that b7 pawn, but I think the players might have considered something like this, and going into this pin, I think this is one of the lines they considered, but this pin is very difficult to resolve in this variation. So say rook a7 with the idea of bishop b6. Right, let's go with this f5. Pawn up here, but it might not be of great significance for white. I think they consider this kind of drawish. Very difficult for white to win this one. So this whole idea of bishop a3 here, I don't think is that hot. Any other possibilities? Check and rook c3. Should we just briefly check that out? Queen a4. Again, slightly better for white, but difficult to win the b6 pawn here. Okay, so in the game we saw actually rook b6, which might be the move promising the most. It seems on depth 20 here, our engine thinks rook b6, good idea. Okay, we saw rook c6, and now it's safe enough to take on b7. No nasty queen c6 check is available, etc. So he's won that pawn. Rook b6 is virtually the only move, I think. Check. Now this next move is given us is very good. So this is the idea: queen d7. That this pin is ineffectual. If black tries to exploit the pin with queen b8, then there's always a rook. Say rook queen b8. There's always rook c1, threatening rook c8. So that's the clever idea behind all this, that this pin on the bishop here is not a big deal. And if bishop f8, I think that's asking for a disaster. Bishop a3, ouch, ouch. So what would white do here? If he takes on a3, then rook takes b6. There's no nasty checks or anything. So that would be a killer move in this position, it seems. If rook c6 in this position, queen e8, keeping that powerful skewer and putting pressure on c6 here. Black is overloaded, I think. Okay, so it's just out of the question there. To play bishop f8, so queen f8 needed, queen d7, and white's got that nagging advantage here, it seems. Okay, but Magnus finds h5, this move h5 here, very interesting move. Also bishop f7 might be another idea just to get the king out, but h5 looks very good as well to solve the problem of this back row. Now if white tries for that back row in this position with rook c1, let's check this out. The interesting thing here is engine liking rook takes b2, offering queen here, which I don't find that convincing initially, but maybe it is a kind of fortress position. If white's finding it very difficult to make progress here, it's a kind of fortress. But I presumed that the idea was actually not to take on b2, but to play like king h7, or does that actually lose? Let's look at this. Rook c8, queen d6. This is very interesting. Queen takes f7. Offering the bishop, and in this position rook c7, and that's very difficult to defend without giving up the queen. So this is a very, very interesting possibility. If the queen's given up here, it's worse than that other continuation. So actually I think there's a question here about this h5, what the real purpose was on queen d7 to play h5 here. Was the idea actually for the rook and bishop versus queen scenario on rook c1 to take here? I'm not sure I vividly remember the idea there. I think maybe that variation was mentioned, and so the idea was rook takes b2. Hang on a sec. There is another idea with check on a8 though. Maybe this is more to the point. f3, and now king h7 is much more bearable. Yes, this looks a lot more likely, this position. So what's the key difference in this position? Let's have a look. Queen takes f7. No wonder Magnus said there were loads of tricks in this game. rook takes b2, and now why would, say, rook c7 fell? There's queen g8 here, queen g8 to defend. Okay, so that's crucial. That in this position, okay, so we see h5. So the move rook c1, playing the check first rather than anything else, and then king h7 must be the idea, surely. Any improvement here, you might think? It doesn't look too likely that there's an improvement. If we kick the queen, it's not really a big deal. Okay, so that's very interesting. This move h5, it's pretty staggering implications, even in this sort of simplified position. So we saw e4. What other possibilities then? I think in the light of queen a8 resources, something like bishop a3 is. Let's check this out. Bishop a3. Queen a8 is actually a very good move here, and then just taking here, and there's no problem. Actually, that's just losing a rook for nothing. Yes. Okay, so we'll go back to the game now. e4 was played, but actually one more thing though to check out in this position. Queen b8, we saw rook c1. Nope, I think that's it. We'll go here. So e4, we saw move queen d6, which looks like a very good move, just to accept being a pawn down, but white has that backward pawn, and it's difficult to kind of exploit. King h7 in this position is not actually possible, because the bishop takes e5. So if queen takes, take, and then take the rook. So we just, for example, takes, then take the rook. So that's not actually possible to play, it seems, because the bishop takes e5. And this would be significantly worse for black, just taking and then taking on e5. Okay, so queen f8, virtually only move, it seems. Queen d7 again, queen d6 again, and now decision to take the queens off. Rook d1. What else is there? Not much else. The king's use of h7 is very important in these endings as well. Not to have to play a bishop f8, which would run into trouble. It's bishop a3 usually. So f5 here, very good move it seems, to tie white down. Otherwise f4 might have been on the cards. Let's just verify that. Actually, is rook d7 possible because of f4 being an issue? I think this could be much more advantageous than the game for white, because the pawns, king comes, maybe pawns, it looks more, pawns have mobility. So in the game, pawn mobility was kept to a minimum with f5. Okay, so prompting, passive looking f3. Now Magnus took on e4. It looks as though it's fairly equal now. This looks a very nice move. Rook b3, tying the bishop down to a very passive location in the game. King coming out, both kings coming out. And was there a possibility coming up of playing g4? That's one to check out. I think in this position, instead of rook d1, if g4, is that very bad here? Possibly. Okay, bishop f4. Let's go with bishop f4. Check. And in this position, let's put the rook over here to protect the bishop. it doesn't seem like a huge deal, even if white has this position. d4. And you might think, isn't d5 attractive in this kind of variation? Maybe not. What is white actually doing here? Okay, so let's go back. In the game, we saw rook d1, king e6, getting out of the way of d4 maybe. And it looks quite peaceful now. So I think draw was the fair result. That's fairly peaceful. Okay, d4 committal, bit committal. And it seems rook takes g3 wasn't interesting as well as what was played. So let's have a quick look at rook takes g3, d takes, check, rook h7, e6. It looks as though this is potentially dangerous. The engine's not really finding anything on this brief analysis anyway. Doesn't, although the pawn looks dangerous, is it actually really dangerous, or is it just potential liability here? It doesn't look anything to write home about this position. So let's go back. So Magnus played an alternative rook e3 check, winning the e pawn instead, and now it's starting to look as though things are panning out for a draw after that g pawn is now vulnerable. It looks like a certain draw of this position. Okay, it'll be hopeless to try and win that with just the h pawn on rook takes h5. So, okay, a very accurately played game, especially by Vladimir, to try and get something out of the opening there. But it seems Magnus always had the resources to just about hold the balance. So a very interesting game. And so finally someone's held Magnus to a draw in this tournament in round 3. Okay. Comments or questions on YouTube? Thanks very much.